Right, so good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Brittany Ray Crowell, an assistant English professor here at the Clark Atlanta University. And we're about to begin just in one moment. We're just waiting on a chair. But I do want to give you a few little reminders before we begin. The QR codes, if you need credit for this session, will be posted outside after the session. Right now, only the Eventbrite links are out there, but the Eventbrite codes, the QR codes for this specific session will be posted on the walls outside. Also, we have a service project where we are writing notes of healing and affirmation for a mother and daughter that were victims of gun violence. And so you'll see these notes that have either the little butterflies, they're in the shape of butterflies, or they're like cards with butterflies. So we really appreciate if you wrote your name and a small message, thank you so much, and where you're from, so that they'll know that people are sending them healing energy from all over. All right, I am so excited about this session today. I've been excited about all the sessions today, actually, but it's just great when you have your colleagues sitting on the panel with other people whose work you also resonate with. So I'm really looking forward to this dialogue and how it connects with all the other wonderful sessions that we've had throughout the past couple of days. So to begin, we have Professor C, as we all know them. Candace, they, them, theirs, is a dynamic educator nurturing creativity and critical thinking, empowering students while advocating for accessible education. Their impactful essays explore subjects from social justice to cultural production, have garnered awards for thought-provoking insights. Currently in their 4th year of the humanities doctoral degree at Clark Atlanta University, yay! Candace's research interests span topics such as decoloniality, systems of power, sociolinguistic justice, and African American women's literature. Osunfunmi Lola, affectionately known as JuJu, is a remarkable figure whose influence spans hosting, education, history, and spirituality within the Black diaspora. With a commitment to preserving and promoting the rich traditions of her heritage, JuJu has made an indelible impact on the cultural and intellectual landscape. As the host of the acclaimed podcast, A Little JuJu, launched in 2018, JuJu has established herself as a knowledgeable and passionate educator. Through her interviews with experts, scholars, and practitioners, she explores the intricacies of Black history, culture, and spirituality. The podcast serves as a vital platform, offering listeners a deep understanding of their ancestral roots and empowering them to reconnect with their heritage. Her efforts have earned her critical acclaim, including an iHeartRadio nomination and recognition in various media outlets. Beyond the podcast, JuJu is a sought-after speaker and host, frequently appearing at panels and live events nationwide. Notably, in 2021, she contributed to Off-White's I Support Black Women campaign, which included webinars and discussions that highlighted the cultural significance of oral traditions within the Black diaspora. Her speaking engagements have further solidified her role as a powerful voice in cultural preservation and advocacy. JuJu also appears in the Hulu docuseries Living for the Dead, produced by Kristen Stewart, where she continues to blend her expertise in history, spirituality, and oration. This appearance marks another milestone in her multifaceted career, showcasing her ability to reach a broader audience while deepening the cultural conversation. Also, that show was really good. I really loved it. Sorry. In 2024, JuJu released her debut book, Book of JuJu, which explores the significance of ancestral veneration as a tool for healing, liberation, and self-discovery. Her book further establishes her as a thought leader in spiritual and cultural practices, offering profound insights into the power of honoring one's lineage. Currently, JuJu is also engaged in a research project with the University of California, Santa Barbara, which will soon be published. The project focuses on 21st century conjurers and practitioners, expanding the conversation on contemporary spiritual practices within the Black community. A proud alumna of Spelman College, JuJu Bey holds a BA in psychology. As an Oshun priest, she continues to serve her community, blending her academic background with her spiritual practices to inspire and educate others. Through her diverse body of work, JuJu Bey is a guiding light for those seeking a deeper connection to their history, spirituality, and self. And last but not least, Jada Rene Allen. Jada Rene Allen is a writer, educator, and culture worker from Southside Chicago, Illinois. She is a recipient of fellowships, scholarships, and support from Tin House, the Kenyon Review, Writers Workshop, Community of Writers, the Frost Place, and VONA, Voices of Our Nation's Arts Foundation, among other organizations. Her writing either appears or is forthcoming in Academy of American Poets Poem-A-Day, Callaloo, Chicago Reader, Gulf Coast Journal, Hayden's Ferry Review, Logic's, Virginia Quarterly Review, Wildness, and elsewhere. She is the founding executive director of the Francis Thompson Arts Foundation, and she is the editor-in-chief of Bodame. Allen lives in Phoenix on U.S.-occupied Yavapai, Oldam, and Hohokam territorial bodies. She is a seer and conjure woman in the Turtle Island African spiritual system of roots in Yaya Induza of her maternal Kanda in the Bukongo spiritual system. So, welcome, JuJu Bey, Jada Allen, and our own Professor C.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are y'all doing? Now, y'all know, because I see my students in here, y'all know how this goes. How y'all doing? All right, thank you. Thank you for being here. I just want to take a moment to really affirm these amazing bios that were read. It's a dream to be sitting here next to both of you. Thank you for making time to be here in such a time as this. And so I'm not going to belabor this. I'm going to kind of hop in with the first question. And this question, I really want my students to listen to how they respond, because this is something I want you to develop as well, okay? And my question to you is, how do you introduce yourself beyond titles? Okay? The question is, how do you introduce yourself beyond titles?
I deeply understand the question. It's interesting too, because when I was on my way here, the woman who was sitting next to me was a former first lady of the church, and she was very sweet. She was a very nice lady. And part of our conversation, we were talking about how in the Black church in specific, there's this craze to want to gain a title, and to sort of ascertain that title without necessarily performing the service that title entails. And so we were talking a little bit about that, about what it means to be. And I'm thinking about like what Zora said about within News and Men, when she was talking about having the crown not necessarily being worth much if you weren't really putting in the work to actually develop and cultivate what it meant to wear the crown. And that, I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember the quote exactly. But I think we also prioritize certain titles that place us in certain positions of power, that we always don't necessarily know how to use that power or utilize that power. And I deeply believe that there are other titles that should be prioritized, like lover. Like, what does it mean to be a lover? What does it mean to be a sister? What does it mean to be a daughter, a cousin, a sister friend, a soulmate, a companion to someone? And so those are titles that I'm working on myself personally. because I want to be a good person. I don't really care about a title like that, but yeah, hopefully I answered the question. Oh,
Okay. I'm a Black girl from Baltimore, through and through. And I think okay, is Baltimore the house? Okay, great. I think that is a title that I'm always referencing and where I'm from, because I think it influences how I am, how I talk, how I interact with people around me, and the work that I do. So I always like to center it in being like, I'm from Baltimore and I'm very proud to be from the city. I also identify with like being a daughter and being a student and having elders and learning from them. I'm very shy. I'm embarrassed when the bio was read. I'm not I don't sit necessarily always in my own power, and I don't always connect with what is being said about me. And so I think that that's always important for me to say too, because sometimes people will sort of situate me and whoever into this place of like, oh wow, like you've done these things, that means that you're this. And it's like, no, I'm insecure, I'm shy, I'm quiet normally, and I'm trying. I identify somebody who is trying.
because you asked an important question, I just meandered around the question as opposed to saying like, oh, this is how I identify. But I would say the two-headed Black girl, just like a girl who's always been in touch with spirit. And two-headed is a title within Hoodoo Conjuration, but it's also something that was, as a child, that was very playful for me, and not as like serious, because it's like the dead would talk to me often and a lot and in various different ways, and in times when I needed to escape from trauma. Spirits were there to like entertain me, take me away from the hardships of childhood. So I would just say a two-headed Black girl from the south side of Chicago.
I love that. Thank you so much. One of the reasons I asked this question first is because we're about to be in conversation, and the theme of this conference is healing and wellness, right? And the laying on of hands. And there are so many ancestral and cultural and spiritual technologies that we have access to. But I think sometimes we are separated from or discouraged from accessing them, in part because of the ways in which we introduce ourselves to the world. And so I wanted you all to hear the language that you use to describe yourself, so that as we talk about what healing looks like, what wellness looks like, and other things, you can come back to the grounding of, yes, you read the bio, you heard the bio, but these are people with stories and experiences. Okay, so now that we've had the cute little introduction, the next question I want to ask is, can you share a little bit of your origin story? Yes, can you share a little bit about your origin story?
Okay, I'm from Baltimore, as I said. I grew up Catholic. I went to Catholic school my entire life. I don't know nothing but Catholic school. I was, so I am deeply traumatized. But also, I think that Catholicism set me up to be who I am as a spiritual practitioner and really a witch. I do identify with that term. And I think that Catholicism set the stage for that. Don't tell them I said that. If you're Catholic in here, I'm sorry. But it's my truth. It's the truth. I went to all girls schools. I think that also influences how I am with people as well. And then I went to Spelman. Also like women. So I think all of these things are tied together, but into how I understand healing as well. I mean, I think that healing as being a Black girl from Baltimore who was Catholic, who had a staunch Catholic background, who left Catholicism when I was, in high school, middle school, when I shouldn't have done that. There's this certain rite and ritual that you go through. As a Catholic, it's called confirmation. You're basically confirming your belief in the Catholic tenets and faith. And I didn't want to get confirmed. And that was a big deal for me because everyone around me was getting confirmed. You know, you buy a dress, like it's a whole thing. And I was like, I don't think I'm ready to confirm this belief. And it was like, but it's like, if it's called confirmation, I should be confirming. I can't confirm. So I'm not going to do it. And I think that pushback, even in, I think that was 8th grade, was like set the precedent for me to ask more questions about what does it mean to heal, what does it mean to eventually be a priestess, what does it mean to conjure, what is wellness even accessible to me? If it is, how is it accessible to my ancestors? How? So I think just being rooted in that, like, that curiosity at such a young age and rejection of what was happening around me opened me up to be able to, it really cracked me open to see, like, wow, there is so much out here in this world that I can try to learn and understand. And there's just so much out here that we don't know. So I need to start moving in this world like I actually don't know. And I think that is what has gotten me where I am, because I'm very open about not knowing and wanting to discover and be curious.
I feel like I have so many because there are so many different aspects of my life where I'm always treading the lines of like liminality. I'm like, what does it mean to be, what does it mean to be, like, what does it mean to start out as this one identity and transform into something different, primarily as far as like my transition is concerned as a Black trans woman. So there's that, me always feeling like I was a little girl, but not necessarily being allowed to affirm my gender based upon a lot of indoctrination that it was primarily Christian within my family. But also, the medicine for that was that I was always able to be creative and imaginative, and my mom always let me do certain things as far as whether it was drawing or there's words for it now, but back then we didn't have words like cosplay or larving or whatever it's called. But just like playing and make pretend as if I was the Wicked Witch of the East, because that was my girl, or the Wicked Witch of the West. The gangrene one is the Wicked Witch of the West, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Her, like I lived for her as a child. I used to snatch the black sheets off of the or not the black sheets, but I used to snatch the black curtains from the curtain holder, and I would like wrap them around myself, and like go ride a broom across the house. Because if I couldn't be a girl, then I would at least be a witch. Never a wizard, never that. So yeah, like I think that was my origin story, falling in love with Harry Potter. Can we curse? Yeah. Fuck J.K. Rowling. Hopefully she gets better with that mold in her apartment. That's causing her to behave in that way. But yeah, I think I always had a proclivity for media that was centered within like witchcraft and things of that nature, because I guess I was a witch. I was a hoodoo before I even knew what the term was. I lived near my grandmother's house. I lived in my grandmother's house, and her house was near Crossroads. And and we lived within a cul-de-sac too, so like that was also something I was just like looking back on. There are certain things as an adult I look back on then that I didn't necessarily know now. I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm a hoodoo baby. And then my grandmother, of course, my great grandmother, she was a hoodoo lady. And I didn't necessarily get to meet her. She died before I was born, but I have a feeling that we spent some time with each other in eternity before I sort of got here to do the things that I'm doing here. And just like learning more about her, the different things that she did as far as like keeping candles within the house, certain incense and things of that nature, going to see a psychic medium and her having dreams that were prophetic, that sort of runs through her side of the family and also my mother's father's side of the family. So yeah, like there were things like in childhood that I didn't necessarily see until I grew up and became reacquainted with my ancestral practices, where I was just like, oh, okay, it was here all along. So
Thank you both for sharing some of your origin stories. One of the things that I jotted down is, like, what does it mean to heal? JuJu, when you said, what does it mean to heal? What does it mean to conjure? And one of the questions that I'm really interested in thinking about is, well, let me first say, as a disabled person, okay, I really struggle with the concept of healing and the ways in which people speak about healing. The rhetoric about my disabilities being something that needs to be fixed rather than accommodated and supported is really tough for me. And so I want to know, from your own language, from your own frameworks, how do you define healing? And what informs that?
How do I define healing? Healing to me is freedom. And I think we have a very limited and finite understanding of what we want freedom to be. I feel like we experience multiple liberations and multiple freedoms throughout our lifetimes. And being free from one thing doesn't necessarily make you free from another. So I define healing as liberation and freedom, as not being stuck, as not being stagnant within a certain situation that is inimical to your well-being or your best and highest good. I don't practice Isheshe-based traditions or Yoruba traditions, but my cousins in the Yoruba diaspora would say Yorori, anything that's thwarting your Ori of its progress. So I think that the cure or the medicines to that would be the liberation or the freedom that you apply. And a lot of the times we don't want to hear this because we just want it to be a one and done situation. But a lot of the times, especially within these spiritual practices, the healing is repetitive, and the medicine, taking the medicine is repetitive, or doing a certain thing is repetitive. And the hopes is that it becomes so repetitive that it becomes second nature. I really resonate with what you said as far as being disabled and practicing these traditions, because of course the ancestors also require a lot. But you also have the body, is the thing. So that's like the one-up that you have of the ancestors, because they can be free of certain limitations physically. We cannot, unless it's something that we are actively being healed from or that can be healed, right? Some of us deal with chronic disabilities and things of that nature. So it's no praying away certain things in order to be productive. Sometimes you just need to rest. You need to lay your ass down. Sometimes unless it's a taboo for you, sometimes you need to smoke a blunt. Sometimes you need to drink some liquor. Whatever you need to do, but also being conscious of the fact that these things are not always, like, it's about balance, right? Within the Bantu Congo concept of balance, the word Kaninga, it speaks to both having a positive and negative polarity within your life. And I think if you try to go to either side of it too much, if you try to dwell within the realm of spirit too much, you will be exhausted, and you will also mess up your health physically, right? And you'll be neglectful of your body. You'll probably also lose your mind if you're too much into the realm of, and I'm speaking especially to like people who are spirit mediums, but if you're too much in the realm of physicality, right, you can also overexhaust yourself. So healing to me is just liberation and freedom, one step at a time, until the end of the world, right? because I do believe in that, even though I don't necessarily identify with Afro-pessimism completely or totally. But I do believe that there are things that we have done to this world that are unforgivable. And I do believe as humans we need to reset because the earth needs to heal. Because we've lost our connection to the earth, that I think that we're slowly but surely getting it back. And these spirits also want these high spirits of conjuration also want us to be rested. It was interesting because I was listening to the song by Muddy Waters, High John the Conqueror, and I was listening to it. I've listened to it so many times, like as like a conjured woman, but like listening to it today, so liberatory because the point I think he was making, because he was talking about different modalities or physical representations within conjuration that you can hold power within, like a mojo, right? Like what he was saying, my mojo may fail, my pistol may snap, all of these things may break or falter, but High John is always consistent. And that was so important to me because I felt as though my relationship with that particular spirit within Conjure was a little strained because I haven't been talking to him every Thursday, et cetera, et cetera. But like, I think he sent that to remind me, like, I want the best for you. So if resting, taking your time away from doing this certain thing is also good for you, then yeah, I want that for you. Because am I not the spirit of liberation? Am I not the spirit of freedom? So yeah, I wanted to share.
What is healing? I think I also identify with understanding it as a form of freedom or a form of liberation. I think healing is first, the word, it's not linear. It's not linear. It's a process. It's a journey. It is subjective. What may feel like healing for me may not feel like healing to Jada. It's different. It's different ways that we understand healing. And in some ways I don't really know, because if it is an energy of liberation or freedom, what is that? What is free? What is freedom? What does that look like? Do we know that? Can we ever know that? Not to dig into Afro-pessimism bag too much, but will we ever know that? What does that mean? So I think it's just up to us what we identify, how we feel more healed or less healed. What are we doing that kind of aligns with, when I do this, I feel very free. That maybe possibly we're engaging in something that's bringing us healing. I remember when I was in graduate school to get my doctorate of clinical psychology, I did not get it because I dropped out of school. And one of the reasons that I dropped out of school was because I was so depressed in graduate school. Like I could not, and it wasn't the information, it wasn't the learning, I was just so depressed, which I think happens in graduate school. I think that's part of it.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Fourth-year doctoral student here.
Right. But I wasn't cut out for that kind of depression. I was like, I don't think I can do this. And I had a dream one night, and this is before I was all into the woo-woo. This is before I was really talking to my ancestors, before I had an ancestor altar. I had a dream of I saw my paternal grandmother's face on the right and my maternal grandmother's face on the left. My maternal grandmother disappeared. So then I was looking into the eyes of my paternal grandmother, who was living at the time. In that moment, it was like I went into her soul and went into her eyes. It was like I traveled in like a black tunnel. And when I opened my eyes, I'm still in the dream, I was aerial view to a plantation. In the dream, I knew the plantation was in South Carolina. I just knew all this information. And I saw this woman who looked like me on this plantation. And I understood that that was a foremother of mine on my paternal side. So basically, this dream is me seeing the day in the life of a slave. Like, it was just day in the life of your slave foremother. And I won't go into detail, but it was horrific what I saw. It was very gruesome. It was very detailed. It was horrific. And I woke up, after I saw something very horrible happen to her, I woke up and I was done for the rest of the day. Like, I was shook, and I had class that day. And funnily enough, I had class with my only black professor at that time. So I went in to Dr. Moore. I sat in class. Normally I was very chatty in class. This time I said nothing because I'd been crying all morning. So she was like, hey, can you stay after class? What's going on? You didn't talk. You didn't raise your hand. I was like, this sounds wild, but I had a bad dream. She was like, what was the dream? So I told her the dream. And she was like, your ancestors are trying to talk to you. And I was like, okay. She's like, you need to listen. She's like, you are in a program, a psychology program, where you're here to do all this healing and trauma work for strangers, and you haven't even done it for yourself or your lineage. And I was like, okay, I think I get what you're putting down. So, long story short, she took me, I don't even know if it's short anymore. She took me to the library. The librarian was a genealogist. She was like, I told her the dream. She was like, I want to help you find out who this foremother is because you need to know who she is and her name. So she built out my family tree. I would go to this librarian once a week for maybe like a month or two. I have a whole family tree now from this dream, from going to my professor to then going to the librarian to then having names for my ancestors. I shared that dream and also this is part of the dream that why I dropped out of school because I learned at that moment that my healing work, I was doing healing work, but that's not the kind I was supposed to be doing. It was more rooted in the spirit. And that's how I found my healing because it wasn't just about me or the psychology or the mind. It was about what my ancestors, how my ancestors' trauma was living within my body. And it was part of how my sadnesses and depressions were largely impacted and influenced, yes, by things I've went through, but also things that they went through and things that I've seen through their eyes. Part of that being slavery, you know. So that is how I've been able to tap into my own healing, but because it's like I've actually been carrying a lot of things that weren't mine. And I think that a lot of us, especially as Black people, people of the diaspora, carry a lot of stuff that's not even ours. And so to get to whatever healing might be, I had to go backwards to go forwards. You know, that Sankofa energy. I had to go back to come here, to be where I am today.
Y'all both bring so many points. I want to talk about Sankofa-ration and Sankofa so we can talk a little bit about time and temporality. If you're in my class, you already know what I'm going to say. Time not linear, and I need you to have language and frameworks to examine other ways of perceiving and engaging with time and temporality. But to your point, you said from a dream, you then had a whole family tree that was built out. You got that lineage. And just really quickly, y'all, I said in the last workshop, my ancestors drugged me back to Atlanta. Let me be clear, I'm from here. Yeah, and I had ran away to Houston, and they said, no, you have work to do. And the work found me through reading. I was reading a book while at Texas Southern under the tutelage of Alexis Brooks DeVita, and she made us read Kindred. Dana is 20, 27, 28, and at that time I was right about there. It was a Saturn return, okay? And I'm reading this, and at the same time I'm learning my ancestors' names, only to find out my great-grandmother, the seven-time great-grandmother, Murtis Fordson, had 19 children for her enslaver. And I'm learning this as I'm reading Kindred, and Dana keeps being transported back to antebellum slavery. She essentially has to save Rufus. Don't say his name. You right, Mama Coco. She had to save that man to ensure the continuation of her lineage. And how do you make that kind of decision? And so the question that I want to talk about is, you talk about healing not being linear. How do you navigate your healing journey without that linear expectation? And specifically, what kind of tools, rituals, practices help orient and ground you as you do that work?
It's interesting too because what while y'all were speaking was this because Black people, we have a lot of problems. But one of the ones that most of our grannies, some of our grannies say, I know that my great grandmother said it, was it's not about where you've been, it's where you're going. That's actually a mistranslation of a Kikongo proverb that actually says it's about where you've been, not where you're going. And so it's interesting to see how that sort of like switches over time and throughout generations, and especially within a generation prior to us where they were the closest to slavery and civil rights injustices that were aberrant, and public lynchings, where they weren't being secretive about it anymore, where it was like publicly, like, this is what we'll do to you, and we'll have a picnic here. And we're going to utilize the trees that you all pray to hang your bodies, and to frighten you out of your whatever autonomy or agency that you thought that you had, which in and of itself is witchcraft, right? Let's be clear. It's racism, witchcraft, anti-Blackness, witchcraft, white supremacy, witchcraft. And so I'm thinking about how they coped with it, like my great granny coped with it because she was a care worker and someone who practiced mutual aid, and everybody would come to Betty's house to get a plate. So knowing that I partially incarnate from her, and that I live in the wake of her love, I wonder what were the practices that she maintained for herself. And one of the things that she did as far as her hoodoo conjuration was she worked a lot with her feet. And feet are very important to me as well as like a Pisces, right? So doing foot washes. And she wasn't as extravagant as we are now with with some of the ingredients that we have for certain spiritual medicines. She simply like washed her feet in like a pot of warm water and salt. Sea salt if she had access to it, but usually salt. And just knowing that, like, she would make that type of time for herself. And she would also like scrape the husks off of her feet with a butter knife. And I was just like, okay. So foot washes are something that I try to do as far as healing practices, especially with bluing, because I have a lot of ancestry from the Gullah Geechee regions. Primarily Low Country, South Carolina, and North Carolina as well, especially North Carolina. So foot washes with anil or bluing, rosemary within it, and other oils like rosemary oil, peppermint oil, things of that nature. And just refreshing my feet because my feet are my portals, right? They help, and also my main means of transportation. They help me get me to and fro. And I live with chronic feet troubles as well. So tending to my feet is something that's really important to me as far as remedying certain things. Was that the question? Okay. Yeah.
When I think about time being linear and I was just I taught a hoodoo class last month, I think it was. And someone who joined the class name is Arthur Flowers, who was a literary hoodoo. Woo-hoo. I think he was maybe part of this last year. And we were talking a lot about revolution and fighting back and all of that. And he was saying, he's like, y'all He's like, yes, we need revolution, but y'all think revolution is supposed to look like what it looked like in the 80s or the 70s or the way that they fought back then. That's not what our revolution is today. Revolution, like the revolution of today, with the changes that we have in society, with the technology that we have, revolution is a marathon. It's not just we gonna turn up one day and not buy nothing, and like everything is just shut down. That's probably likely not going to happen, and it probably cannot happen because of the current system that we are in. So revolution has to look like what I talk to young people about, and then what they talk to young people about. So we have to imagine that revolution is not for me, that I might not see that liberation that I'm working towards. And if I have children, they might not see, they probably will not see, but maybe my great grandchildren will. But that is the work that I have to do. We have to do today, whether you have bio children or not, just young people. That's work that we have to do today to imagine what revolution looks like. And so it reminds me of what you're talking about with this linear concepts of time and linear concepts of healing. It's more so like the work that I'm doing today, I have to contextualize that. And how will that matter in 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, 50 years? Is it important enough for me to consider the future about this? If not, then I have to let certain things go, because there's work to be done that I know may not benefit me in this physical form. It'll benefit me probably as an ancestor. And so I think also with time, considering, yes, we have ancestors and people that sacrificed for us and loved us, but we are also going to be ancestors. So what choices are we making to be good ancestors? What decisions do we have to make so that when people think back on what you left, who you were, it makes them feel good, or they have something to reference, or people will call your name in certain rooms. You know, these are things that we learn throughout African cosmology that matter, because when you die and no one remembers you, that you gone. Like you're gone, and we don't want to be gone. And so especially the work as us of the diaspora, us remembering who came before us calling names of people, us naming buildings after ancestors, these things matter because cosmology teaches us we don't want to be gone. And we have a lot of people who are gone, people that we were related to whose names we will never, ever know. And so how do we bring them a part of this? Because we can acknowledge that I might have learned, in school time is time, 3 is 3. 3 o'clock is 3 o'clock, but no, it's CP time does have some roots. There's things about time that we have to trouble. I'm not saying come late to things, but it's more so about thinking in more of an indigenous understanding of how we are relating to each other and time and the world and our ancestors, and then also who comes after us. So how can we see ourselves as good ancestors? How can we be good spirits? And how do we steward a better world by the choices that we make today? And knowing that matters. That matters.
And speaking of time, there's something that I thought about and I find very interesting, and also sort of answers the question a little bit. Prayer is also very integral to my lineage. If you don't have nothing else, pray. And that's where we come from, right? The hush harbors, that was nothing but prayer. And we didn't have anything but what we made certain things out of, like drums and things of that nature. And our own voices, right? From the hush harbor to the praise house, right? Prayer was integral to what we practice as Black people. So praying is also very essential to me, and not just to always this, especially coming out of the Black Baptist Church for the majority of my life, which is, I guess, could be another origin story. But not to this outer deity that is benevolent and kind that I can't necessarily reach, but praying also to my personal divinity, praying to my personal goddess, my personal God, and also realizing that is also an aspect of traversing time, because there was an instance when I was praying and I was just so tired and also just like, I don't know what the hell to do. But something came over me to start speaking to myself as if I was speaking to myself in the future. And in some ways I was. And so you can talk to yourself in different timelines. And I just wanted to like share that little tidbit for folks who are, it's difficult to sort of pray because for me, for a while, before I started praying to my ancestors more conscientiously, and not just the Black Madonna, because she's also been integral to my spiritual practice for like such a long time, because Black women are that important to me, specifically my mother. Seeing what she did as a single mother is very impactful to me. But praying to my ancestors and also then them leading me to pray to my own personal divinity that, hey, you can touch yourself and that is a manifestation of the divine, right? And you can speak over yourself as if you're speaking over yourself from different timelines because you're having a conversation with yourself through time. That's what I think prayer is, especially if you're practicing ancestral indigenous technologies where you're praying to your personal divinity. In Igbo cosmology, they would call it your chi. And the Europe folks will call it the Ori. Within Bantu Congo cosmology, they would be your moyo, your soul, or also your into, your head, right? So yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. That definition of prayer is very helpful to think about the way in which you can traverse time. I had to write that down. You did that. Jada, Rene, let me tell you. And it makes me want to ask more about prayer, meditation, but writing as prayer, writing as ritual, writing as healing. For me, I shared this, I got about 15 years worth of journals, and I come from journaling people. And one of my greatest griefs is that my mother burned all her journals. But I sit in the question of what ritual was that for her? And how might that have got her free from something? So while I don't love that those journals were burnt up, I got my own, just started a new one. And so I want you to share, how do you think about writing in relation to your well-being, your wellness, your ability to expand?
Okay. I come from a writing, I don't even know if it's a lineage. I know that when I was young, I was always a writer. I was the girl writing short stories, writing poems. It's just how I was able to process being a very, only child, quiet, girl in a city where everybody's really loud. I think journaling was like how I was able to just get it out. Also, I'm a triple Cancer. I got a lot of feelings. So, writing has always been a safe space for me to process all of my feelings. So I have journals from 3rd grade, 2nd grade, girls I ain't like in school, people who ain't like me, like all of that is on paper. And I think that, and I also know that I moved away from the writing practice for a while, and I noticed that there is something that shifts in me when I'm not writing. And sometimes it can be hard to write. Not that the process of the writing itself is hard. The process to start is the hardest. So when you feel like, I don't have anything to say, I'm not feeling creative, and Arthur Flowers is someone who was kind of like, it ain't about being creative. Write. Just write. Nobody asks, you're not going to have something drop into you. It's like, and here's the creative, go write. You have to do it. And so when I started to just do it, even when I didn't feel like it, because sometimes it ain't about your feelings sometimes. As a Cancer, I've had to learn that it's not always about how you feel, it's about what you do and how you commit. And so the commitment to writing has definitely aided in my own, self-awareness practice, my toxicities. Like the words always reflect back to me. They're like a mirror for me. And if I didn't have those words, there's times in my life where I've been out here wilding and I was not writing. And I know that the words for me are like an accountability measure. So even when I'm annoyed, upset, mad at my part, anything, when I write about it, I be like, oh, I was tripping. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. So I like to use writing as a reflection, as a mirror, as a way to understand, not just understand the self, but then to go back to choices, make better and different choices for my community, my loved ones, my family, the people that hold me accountable. Like the pages have to hold me accountable first, and then anybody else can. So I encourage it for people, and I'm a reader. I read people like spiritually, psychic, and a lot of times people's ancestors come through and say they need to be writing all the time, and they're like, "Well, I'm not a writer," and I'm like, "Well, your people are saying you're a writer, so I don't know what to tell you." Like, you might not think you're a writer, but have you written to know if you're even a writer, or that you have something to say? Maybe you just don't think you have anything to say, and that's what we need to get to. Why do you feel that there's nothing that you have to offer through writing? So it's such a beautiful practice when you just start. I forgot what the whole question was, but that's all I wanted to say about that writing piece. Okay.
So the question I was asking is, can you talk about writing as ritual, writing as healing, writing as well? Yeah, you did that. Okay. I also just need to mention, it's a lot of water energy up here. Scorpio sun, Capricorn moon, but Cancer rising, friend.
Sidereal, Scorpio rising, and Pisces moon in both systems, so emotional bitch. It's interesting because at one point I couldn't even read when I was like in 4th or 5th grade, and I had to literally teach myself how to read. And once I started to learn how to read, words just captivated me, how they sounded, the musicality within them. I have, we would know it in the Francophone sense of griots, but the indigenous term, the love term, would actually be Joel. I have Joel within, a lot of Joel within my lineage because I have Senegambian ancestry as well. And they didn't necessarily write. They played music and song, and that's how they kept history, family history, and also collective history sometimes if they were a historian for the community. And yeah, like it's something about, and that's primarily my paternal lineage, which I feel estranged from, and I still have some wounds about. If we're speaking about healing, I have some wounds deeply about that because my father, who's one of my abusers, he was a singer. And I inherit the gift of singing, which I barely do, I don't really do, from that lineage, right? And it's been so difficult for me to own my own voice, especially being somebody who was a junior, my God. It was very difficult for me to own my own voice, so the page was my strength. The page was where I drew my power from. Because I knew that that's where I could practice and play all I wanted to with my voice, even though it wasn't necessarily a voice that was audible. And so I'm just getting emotional just thinking about it, but I really enjoy and I love writing. Hey. Yeah, baby, I'm gonna acknowledge you, my sweet sister. But yeah, like the page was a place I could privately explore before I started publishing, and started to perform my poems, where I could explore also taboo things that I couldn't necessarily even talk about with other people. And I think that's probably the collective ancestral pull to also chronicle these stories, because it's not just the trauma that we inherit as well, it's the stories, period. And they just so happen to be rooted within trauma because, we Black, Yeah, I'm not gonna say that one word because people are kind of adverse to it, especially the elders. So be respectful. But we're black. Niggas, we niggas. Because Mama Coco's like, huh? We niggas. So yeah, there's inherently going to be some. There's inherently going to be some trauma there, but I think there are spirits who just want their stories told. Period. And I'm thinking about like what Denzel Washington said. I think the greatest potential is in the graveyard. Like go to the graveyard and you see where the greatest potential is. People who haven't lived out their lives, their dreams, and they couldn't for the most part because of capitalism, because of the state, because of white supremacy. And I think that writing is one of the tools now that we have access to, and the market of writing also, because there are just so many diverse and rich stories within all of us, our ancestral spirits, our spiritual guides, right? All of these incorporeal folks who want their stories told and want their narratives sort of confirmed by those who are here, whether or not it gets published, right? So that in and of itself is it just also so you can be clear as well, because if you are like me, I'm very on the autism/ADHD spectrum, and so like remembering things is very difficult for me. So I will flip through a journal or look through a Word document, and I would see something that's just like, well, that's profound, and I probably have something different to add to it now that I have a different context and now I've been practicing certain things or having certain dreams, visions, etc. And we'll talk about more about like the clairsenses within the JuJu Poetics Workshop, like what it means to sort of channel spirit. But yeah, like the dead want to be heard, and they also want their stories chronicled, at least by their lineages, whether or not it's seen, because in a lot of these spiritual practices, these are closed practices, so not everything is meant to be shared. So yeah, just wanted to share.
In true neurodivergent form, I'm like, I want to ask you 11 questions back to back, but I'm going to slow it down so I don't do that, okay? But the thing that I'm really sitting in right now is like the power of a story, right? And I want to give you a moment to really think, do some memory work, and identify like, what's one of the most transformative stories that's been shared with you? And this can be fiction, nonfiction. I want to be very open in this, but the most impactful or transformative story that you've received.
I wouldn't say it's a story, but there are certain questions that I have of my ancestors. With me, my ancestors sometimes speak as a collective voice if they're from a certain, like in the Spiritismo, they call them comisiones, or in New Conjuration, it would just be a commission, right? For example, if you have a lot of farmers within your lineage, they may come forward as a collective voice, or they may send somebody who is basically an intermediary for that collective of spirits, and they would talk to you about certain things. I have brew workers, conjure women, a lot of conjure women who conjured within my frame. And one day I was curious as to like why some of them stayed on those plantations when they had the technologies to free themselves. And one of the things that one of the women told me was, well, I had an oath as a conjure woman, I had an oath as a priestess to stay and help the people on that plantation, so I couldn't free myself, but I could get people to freedom one step at a time. And I think that like really like shook me, just as a reason why because you see it a lot in slave narratives, like in the slave narrative, Frederick Douglass, of a conjure person who was on the plantation. I can't remember his name. Sandy, yeah, Sandy, who taught them about Hajj, And I'm just like, if you had in questions like that I also have of literature, which I think is very important, and why I love African American literature, whether it's memoir or fiction, because reading it, you will have certain questions of it. It's like, because my question after reading that narrative, and also just developing my spiritual practice and speaking with my ancestors more as to what's TV, like what's going on. That was a question that I had. Like, why would you choose to stay on those plantations? And they chose to stay for Black people, the other Black people who were there, who were tethered and tied to those plantations, who they were attempting to get free as well. And so it's so interesting because it's within African American history and culture and like how we are socialized with each other. We think that it's always this one thing and this one way, and that's not always the case, right? Some of our ancestors chose to flee and was like, F all this, I'm just gonna go and make my own little maroon community, right? And in other situations, you have herbalists, root workers, practitioners, conjurers who chose to stay for the good of the people on that plantation because they knew that they were one of the only people who could remedy to their spirits and to their souls and to their physical forms. So I think like that was like a watershed moment for me. And also something that I reconsider now as somebody who's thinking of leaving this fucking country. And it's just like, I have family here. Like, is it realistic that we can all uproot ourselves and just go somewhere else? And I can't leave my family, especially like my nieces and my nephews. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you all so much for the amazing, thoughtful responses. We're gonna open the floor for questions. Please come forward or stand up so we can hear you. Are there any questions?
Hello, thank you all for coming today. My name is Mary Elizabeth and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And my question is, do you have any advice on family archival or healing work in families that have been impacted by abuse or domestic violence, especially as so many families have been impacted by different addictions, incarcerations, and being institutionalized?
That's a great question. I don't know the full answers to all of that because I think that's something that I'm also navigating in my own family. But I will say I think the more information, the better. I think sometimes I have wanted to, and even some of my clients want to sort of shy away from the totality of the story. Or, we'll focus on, my grandma was great. Like, I don't know about nobody, like, but it's so important to know those stories too. And to ask questions, to ask why was that hidden? Why was so-and-so doing this, that, and the third? Because it needs to be, because I think our ancestors and elders too, have often just hushed around certain things. And I feel like we are in a time now where the things that were buried deep are trying to come up and be seen and known. So I think for me, it's about not shying away from the harder topics and conversations to give light to that, story, to give light to, the cousins that never said much, but only to one person. Like, that person's story is a part of our ancestral knowledge and history. It's not the beautiful, sexy, cute parts, but that also informs our lives, how we were raised, how our mama was raised, why daddy did what he did. That all is informed by things. And so I think as we are on an ancestral journey, we have to know those things too, and not necessarily pretend that they don't exist, but be a part of the lineage that's keeping it hushed and pushed down too.
I always, especially if you're starting out, I always recommend ancestor veneration, obviously, but ancestor elevation. Because that as a technology has really been helpful for me to get clear. Because a lot of the times spirits be coming forward, and it could be an ancestors of our own lineage, but just to be greedy, just because you set something out on the altar, and it's just like, and because they don't have the expertise and you haven't necessarily been clear about what it is that you want from them, they're just gonna take something and roll with it and just tell you one thing and just do another sometimes. And so I think ancestor elevation, especially for those who were the custodians of our lineage, those who kept ancestral altars, those who were the prayer warriors of the family, etc., enlisting those specific spirits to sort of be an intermediary between you and the divine, so to speak, and making sure that they're elevated enough to come clear to you, and to be honest with you and integral to you. And ancestor elevation can look like a lot of different things, but one of the ways that I was trained or taught was taking a white plate, which is kaolin clay, taking a white plate, a fireproof plate, let me be clear, a white kaolin fireproof plate, placing it on the floor, getting a white candle, placing it on the plate, getting a cool glass of water, and just enlisting your ancestral spirits, calling them into the room, those who are honorable, benevolent, and who want to know peace, and who also want to do work for the lineage. That's the other clear part that you have to be intentional about speaking, because not every ancestor wants to do work for the lineage, and that's understandable. They can either choose to participate or they can get on. And some also have been putting a lot of work in for the lineage, and they probably just want a little rest, and that's fine too. And they also, in a way, deserve elevation. But for the specific task of what you want, whatever it is your intention is, ask for your honorable and benevolent ancestors to come forward, those who want to do work for the lineage to come forward to receive the light, and receive the cool water. You can burn incense too. It's not necessary, but you can burn incense too. If you don't have pets, camphor is really good. I learned about this from JuJu podcast. Camphor is really good to burn if you don't have pets, because it can be toxic to pets in the home, to really clear a lot of negative and nasty energy out of your home. So you can burn camphor from the back of your house to the front. Make sure the windows are open. And yeah, just call forward your honorable benevolent ancestors, those who want to do work for your lineage, and then pray. If you come from a Christian lineage, Our Father, and then even if you don't come from a Christian lineage, Our Father, Hail Mary is really good, especially because a lot of us have Congo spirits. And at one point, the Congo kingdom was a Catholic kingdom. And so those are really good spirits to call forward especially when you want liberation from something, especially something like abuse. And other ancestral pathologies or whatever, because they are gifted healers. And as the days go on, you repeat that process, but lifting the plate, placing it on a stack of books or a shelf or a counter, etc., until it reaches the height of your ancestor altar. If you do keep an ancestor altar like on a cabinet or a shelf or something like that, or you can do it for a set number of days, like 3 days to 9 days. Some people do even like a whole moon cycle, which is like 27 to 28 days or 29 days. So hopefully I answered your question and I was clear on that. So that's what I would recommend for that. And I would also deeply recommend like working with a primary ancestor, and then from there letting that ancestor be the bridge between you and your other ancestors, because it can get overwhelming, especially if you are a spirit medium.
Thank you so much, Jada, Rene, and JuJu for an amazing conversation. I want to give a gentle reminder that at 3:05 in Thayer Hall, room 320, Jada Rene will be delivering the JuJu Poetics Workshop. That is in Thayer Hall, room 320. We'd like to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your experiences, and all of who you are with us.
We also have some gifts for you, so I will give those to you when you come down from the stage. Thank you all for being here, and have a wonderful day.